This is Jones & Co. Now, Alan Jones and Peter Credland.
Before we go any further, so much has been written and said about the ABC that I'm sure most people have had a gutful. But it is our ABC, and over $1 billion of taxpayers' money goes to the ABC every year. And all spending of taxpayer dollars should be thoroughly scrutinised. Everyone working for the ABC is funded by the taxpayer. So this business about independence can only take us so far. This crisis in the ABC is not about bias. Without going into the detail, it's clear that there is fault on both sides when we're talking about the chairman, Justin Milne, and the managing director, Michelle Guthrie. Both have gone. Milne, the chairman, was out of order in calling for people to be sacked and shot, even though he may have been speaking metaphorically. The first problem is that Milne was appointed by Malcolm Turnbull, and he's a Turnbull mate. So Turnbull felt he had a ready avenue of complaint against the ABC, and he obviously used that avenue. That's the way Mr Turnbull operates, unfortunately. But why Milne had to go is that he seemed to want to be the chairman and the managing director, notwithstanding the fact that Mr Milne's concerns were very valid. After all, Michelle Guthrie, apart from being the managing director, is also the editor-in-chief. We should be grateful that Justin Milne objected when a now axed so-called ABC comedy show Tonightly labelled an Australian Conservative political candidate, Kevin Bailey, on television a C. According to an 11-page document that Michelle Guthrie presented to the board, Mr Milne had told his managing director, "Not one person thinks this is OK, including Labor politicians who think we're crazy." Well, most people would agree with Milne. But if Guthrie didn't see that that kind of language was unacceptable, then she is living in another world. Milne demanded editorial policy be changed. That is a legitimate demand. Then you've got this Emma Alberici, who's supposed to be their chief economics correspondent or expert or whatever. She authored a story in February on corporate tax, which, apart from being hopelessly inaccurate, also demonstrated an astonishing ignorance. She didn't know the difference between income and profit, and she savaged the Turnbull government's company tax cuts. How the hell can she get a job talking economics? I don't know. So well may Milne again express his anger. But the perception is that he was the mouthpiece for Malcolm Turnbull, arguing of Emma Alberici that the government hates her. Milne allowing himself to be a mouthpiece for Turnbull is completely over the odds. Surely the issue about Alberici and Probin, and I'll come to him in a moment, is not about angering the government. That shouldn't even be a factor. It's about being brain-dead wrong, inaccurate. But Milne would have to be brain-dead to put this stupid stuff in an email. Yet something should have been done. Multiple corrections were made to the Alberici story, which prompted complaints from more than just the Prime Minister. So the ABC took the article down and reworked it. Even so, we now learn that the woman appointed acting managing director, Kirsten Ferguson, actually congratulated Alberici on the story. So how economically literate is she? But one reading of the story indicated that Alberici knew nothing of the difference between profit and income. Milne emailed Guthrie, Alberici, quote, "They frickin' hate her. Alberici keeps sticking it to them with a clear bias against them. We clear her as OK. We're tarred with her brush. I just think it's simple. Get rid of her. My view is we need to save the corporation, not Emma. And there's no guarantee they will lose the next election." Well, many people would agree with some of those sentiments, but I repeat again, the issue is not that the government hates her. The issue is she was hopelessly wrong. Then you've got this whippersnapper, Andrew Probin, who was censured by the media watchdog ACMA for calling Tony Abbott, quote, "the most destructive politician of his generation." Probin went on, untouched by management, to accuse the coalition of calling the 5 by-elections to coincide with the ALP National Conference. Now, apart from being made up, it's also a politically inept comment because one would have thought widespread coverage of an ALP National Conference would most probably be beneficial to the coalition. But Probin's comments are anything but independent and objective. Then Probin invented the argument more recently that there was some conspiracy between Rupert Murdoch and Kerry Stokes to get rid of Malcolm Turnbull. The ABC led with the story and repeated it. It was rubbish. So one has some sympathy for Milne in wondering where the hell the ABC was heading. And if Michelle Guthrie was the editor-in-chief, then what on earth was she doing? It is our ABC, and it's imperative that, according to the Act, it's objective and capable of being trusted. The ABC has a simple charter defined by the Act, where under 8(1)(c), the ABC has a duty, quote, "to ensure that news and information is accurate, impartial and objective." But Alberici has kept her job and she doesn't know the difference between income and profit. Probin's kept his job, filing reports riddled with untruths and immensely damaging to the ABC brand. But is there any surprise in all of this? The ABC Act also requires directors to be, quote, experienced in broadcasting, communications or management. Well, apart from the staff representative Jane Connors, not one of the board has broadcast or communications experience. There are a few professional directors, an accountant, a property developer. Milne lists himself as a film producer. All of them were appointed, remember, by Conservative governments. And it must surprise many in the ABC who thought Turnbull was their darling that behind the scenes he, according to Milne, was going ballistic over ABC reporting. Well, may Lee Sales, the very talented presenter of the current affairs program, the 7:30 Report, argue that the whole board has some serious questions to answer. Did they know that Milne was being a mouthpiece for the government? Did they know of his language? Did the board approve of hopelessly inaccurate work by Alberici and Probin, let alone someone using the language that was used on a so-called comedy show? This brings me, if we're talking about accuracy and objectivity, to another journalist, Philip Khoury of the Financial Review newspaper, and the lady beside me, Peter Credlin. Recently, Tony Abbott faced endorsement as the Liberal candidate for Warringah. He did not face pre-selection. He was unopposed. But in the endorsement vote, there were a whole pack of lefties, Photios and Turnbull inspired, seeking to embarrass Abbott when the vote from about 100 people was taken to endorse him. Stories appeared online on the Friday night that Abbott had won barely 50% of the vote. Peter Credlin is more informed on these matters than almost anyone. She believed the stories didn't make sense. She has her contacts. She texted immediately to find out. She firstly found out that the vote wasn't even finished, and yet these stories were running. Easy to criticise the ABC for lacking objectivity and truth. Here were stories being leaked by the left designed to damage Abbott, and the figures were made up. And you recall headlines all weekend that Abbott was virtually unwanted by his own conference. And then on the following Monday, Mr Khoury of the Financial Review wrote, and I quote, Tony Abbott was unable to command a majority of votes among his own branch members on Friday night when he sought to have his pre-selection endorsed. Out of 93 pre-selectors, Mr Abbott received just 46 votes, while 38 rejected his renomination and 9 abstained, unquote. This was presented as fact. Quote, Mr Abbott received just 46 votes, while 38 rejected his nomination. Surely Mr Khoury is in the same league as Alberici and Probin, making it up. Peter Credlin knew it was wrong, and she said as much on air on the station soon after. She said Khoury needed to get his facts straight. It was not a tight race, as Khoury reported. In fact, Abbott had received around 70% of the vote. She said on air that Khoury was lazy not to have made contact with Abbott or his office to verify the numbers. And she told Khoury that he shouldn't be presenting as fact something he had only been told by self-serving so-called sources. For her trouble, Peter copped foul abuse and foul language from Mr Khoury. But apparently that's OK, because Peter Credlin's a Conservative person. If a Conservative had dished this out to a lefty female journalist, can you imagine? Mr Khoury's defence is that the texts were private. So presumably Mr Khoury is in the habit of sending private texts which are littered with the F word to a woman. Mr Khoury told Peter Credlin he wouldn't be lectured by her on journalism. Well, journalism is surely not where you cite fiction as fact, or when your error is pointed out, you use foul language. All that Peter Credlin did was to pull Mr Khoury into line with the truth. In return, she copped foul abuse. But Mr Khoury, like Miss Alberici and Mr Probin, continues on. And these are the people who preach journalistic standards. Probin at the ABC gathers massive headlines, writing a fictitious story that Kerry Stokes was behind the removal of Malcolm Turnbull. The ABC reported it at great length. Probin's opinion became fact after one phone call being made. Kerry Stokes rejected the Probin story. ABC News failed to report Mr Stokes' rejection, but Probin remains unanswerable. Alberici doesn't know the difference between profit and income. She continues on. Peter Credlin points out Mr Khoury's errors based on hope, not fact, and for her trouble, she has filthy language thrown at her. Khoury continues on his way. Dishonest reporting, untruths, foul language. It's not only our ABC that has problems.